All right, now it's time for Nosferatu, the original vampire, or original Dracula, whatever you want to call it. So, this is 100 years old, a little over 100 years old. And I had not seen it until fairly recently. And I am impressed, but at the same time going, yeah, okay. So let me explain. I knew of the story of like Bram Stoker's Dracula, from the beginning. They loaded him onto the Demeter, which then went to the mainland, and then the actual story goes that way. I mean, hell, we got Bram Stoker's Dracula movie with Gary Oldman. We got The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which tells that one chapter. They spread that one chapter into a whole movie, which that was a fun, campy, bloody movie, bloody monster film, and it was fun. Okay, I actually liked that film, but we've gotten like many different versions, and even multiple versions of Nosferatu, including last year, as of when I'm recording this, last year Robert Eggers made a pretty good adaptation of it. I didn't love it like a lot of people did, but I did like it. And this is kind of pulling from that. That was pulling from something like this. So this is a silent film from 1922. And this was kind of the thing where, you watch it now and it's just like, it's kind of a chore to get through. But at the same time, it's a silent film. Back then they really didn't understand what the definition of pacing was. Even go into like the Universal Monsters, or even some of the films in like the 40s and 50s, they had a better understanding of what pacing was. But but this was like during like the start of film. Like film had only been made for like, I think like 10, 15 years before this. So there was a lot of this where they still had to figure this stuff out. And, pulling from the actual Bram Stoker's Dracula novel, they actually do a pretty good adaptation of it. Like, pretty good. Like, I was pretty impressed, because after watching, something like Eggers' version, where, I think he does a little bit more, this was still a very, very well done adaptation. I still think, it was pretty spooky. And the fact that a lot of the times they had they literally had to figure this stuff out. There's a movie called Shadow of a Vampire that was made, I think, in the 90s, where it was kind of like the making of this. And it was like, the fact they had to like literally like figure everything out like as they were going is very impressive. And the fact that this is a little over 100 years old, and a lot of the stuff is still very effective. Like a lot of the shadows, where they put Nosferatu is pretty creepy. The main character, he, when he's staying at Nosferatu's castle, he opens the door, and then he just sees Nosferatu just standing down the hallway, and it's all dark, and it's just, you see him. Or even like a part where it's like a little bit later after that, it's just a shot of his door, and the door just flies open, and it's just darkness. And it's like, that's creepy. That's pretty creepy. So a lot of the stuff they had to figure out, and a lot they do with shadows, and I think it's really, really cool. So, did it scare me? No, but I'm looking at this from a, technical standpoint. and it still was very effective. You know, the fact that they were able to do all this stuff. Now, granted, it's a little dated now, especially, you know, with its pacing, but, you know, it's still very, very effective. The only real criticism I have, which, you know, this is kind of nitpicking at this point, is the fact that it's a silent film, and this is one of the reasons why I don't watch anime, is because when I mute anime, like maybe like a random chance that I watch it, whenever I mute anime, I can just make up silly voices as they go and just put in like dubbed stuff. It's almost like that show Ghost Stories, where the English dubbed version, they didn't give a shit, so they just put in like a whole bunch of swearing and offensive stuff, and it was like, wow, you guys got balls. So silent films are kind of the same way. Like, I'm watching them kind of perform and, you know, like stage act, and, you know, I'm just like being immature and just doing like the stupidest things, and it's like, yeah. So that's not a criticism of the movie at all. That's just me personally. This is why I don't really watch anime or even silent films. And sometimes the music that they have in here, while at some points I think it was effective, at some other points it doesn't really affect anything. So like, it could be like a tense, scary moment popping up, and the music is very spooky, very like building, like it, you know, rising, and then the next scene it completely cuts away, and it's all like happy, cheerful music, and it's like, whoa, what just happened there? Like, what happened? And, you know, is this something that I would watch again in the future? It's hard to say. It might be something where I'm like, I'm going to pop in and out every now and then because of its pacing, because there were times where I was like, all right, we got to speed this thing up. You know, I thought it was like maybe an hour in, and I was maybe like 40 minutes in. I was like, all right. And actually, if I'm going to be completely honest, I watched this in 2 parts. I stopped it halfway through, and the movie's an hour and a half. I stopped it halfway through in like the 45-minute mark, and then I watched the other half on a different day, because I was like, yeah, I don't think this is something where I'm gonna like watch it all in one go. This is kind of like a segment movie, or like a 2-part thing. So on a personal thing, I don't know if I'll watch this again, but, you know, I wanted to watch this because, you know, I love horror, and this is kind of like, this is like one of the like great grandfathers of horror. You know, we got like, you know, a couple years, like a decade later, we started getting the Universal monsters, and then that kickstarted a whole new thing. But, you know, it was kind of like, people like think like, yeah, the Universal monsters was the first to start it. It's just like, no, actually there was stuff like this started it. And so I'm like really fascinated to learn more about how they filmed all this, because it is very, very, very impressive. And I was very surprised on how much a lot of it still holds up. Now, if I take like the little criticisms I have away, which aren't really even criticisms, I still find myself not giving this an amazing. I do give this a great, very high grade, but it's just something where I'm like, I don't see myself watching this again in the future. And a lot of that has to do with the pacing. But, you know, my first introduction to this Nosferatu was, of course, SpongeBob. So if it wasn't for SpongeBob, I thought it was honestly something they just made up, and was just like, what the hell is that? And if you don't know, just look up SpongeBob Nosferatu or the Slinging Slasher episode. And it was kind of like, what the hell happened? What was that? That was so random. And it was one of those just like, moments where I was like, whoa, what was that? And then that kind of built in, and then I found out, like, oh, there's an actual movie of that. Oh, okay. And then it all came from there. But, for a movie by itself, I think it's very effective. Would I watch it again? No. But it is a staple of horror and how incredible the horror genre really is.